Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to the ITF In Focus session on connectivity and inclusive growth in emerging economies. So particularly focusing on the role of regional freight transport. So my name is Gwenin Chen from the International Transport Forum. I'm the team lead of Data and Policy Analytics. It's my honor to organize and also moderate this session today. As we all know, transport connectivity is fundamental in enabling people and firms access to regional and international markets. Better transport connectivity can increase trade volume and also the competitiveness of different cities, regions, and countries, thereby promoting economic growth, social integration, income distribution, and also poverty reduction. So in developing countries, enhancing transport connectivity is particularly important, given the expected rising freight demand. Therefore, improving the quantity and the quality of the freight transport infrastructure is really essential, especially in major corridors and networks, to make border crossing and international transport easier, cheaper, and faster. So given that this is an ITF In Focus session, please allow me to also highlight what ITF has been doing and is also planning to do in this area. So connectivity is one of the 5 focus areas of ITF research. Back in 2019, ITF already published a report on enhancing connectivity and freight in Central Asia region and provided recommendations for improving connectivity. Currently, we are also in the preparation phase for 2 additional regional studies in Central Asia and Southeast Asia regions. This project is part of the transport work stream under the Sustainable Infrastructure Program in Asia, funded by the International Climate Initiative of the German government. So the regional studies are expected to kick off early next year, focusing on identifying the connectivity gaps until 2050, the physical and soft measures required to close the gaps, and also the environmental impacts of the infrastructure investments. Consider the whole infrastructure life cycle. So today's session will be very helpful for the 2 projects. So we've got a fantastic panel today covering 3 different sectors: road, port, maritime, and also railway, and also multilateral development banks. And we also want to hear from you, of course, in the audience, your questions as well. So now let me introduce my panelists today, starting from my right-hand side. So Mr. James Leather, Chief of the Transport Sector Group from the Asian Development Bank. Mr. Leather has 30 years of experience in transport, working internationally with development organizations, governments, private sector, and research institutions. James also leads ADB's transport sector operations and also oversees the strategic directions of ADB's knowledge, technical and financial support to its developing member countries. A warm welcome to you, James. So next to him is Madame Lamia Kerjuc. She is the Secretary General of the Federation of European Private Port Companies and Terminals since March 2014. So she has a professional experience of more than 27 years, during which she held different positions in the maritime and logistics sector. Among others, she has been the public affairs manager of the French Ship Owners Organization for more than 7 years as well. Thanks for being us today. Next to her is Mr. Philippe Vandenboss, Senior Freight Strategy Advisor at UIC. So he has more than 25 years of experience in supply chain matters. At UIC, Mr. Vandenboss focuses on international logistics topics and the way UIC can support international corridor development. So besides this, he also leads the combined transport and special quality groups. In addition, he also comments and publishes on logistics and mobility issues at stake. Welcome to the panel, Mr. Vandenboss. Next to him is Mr. Binyam Reza. Mr. Reza is the Global Practice Manager and Acting Global Director for Transport in the World Bank. Before being selected for this position, Mr. Reza was the Regional Practice Manager for China, Mongolia, and Central Asia, where he oversaw a lending program totaling $8 billion US, covering all subsectors. Thanks for joining our panel today, Mr. Reza. Our last panelist, Mr. Radu Dinescu, the President of IRU, International Road Transport Union. Mr. Dinescu was elected IRU President in 2020. Prior to that, he was a member of the IRU Presidential Executive on behalf of Passenger Transport Committee and Vice President of IRU's Goods Transport Committee. So as IRU President, Mr. Dinescu believes in the crucial role of commercial road mobility and logistics in paving the way to a safe, prosperous, and sustainable world. Great to have you, Mr. Dinescu. All right. So now I would like to start our discussion today with my first question to the panel. I will be seated over here. So the first question from me would be to know your views on the importance of regional connectivity to promote inclusive growth and the challenges that the emerging economies are facing. So let me start from you, Mr. Dinescu. In your view, what are the currently most pressing issues existing for the regional road transport sector, and how are they affecting the inclusive economic growth for the region?
Thank you very much. I think all of us will have challenges nowadays. I would start to say that International Road Transport Union, IAU, is the World Road Transport Organization, representing 3.5 million companies in more than 100 countries that are involved in the road transport, mobility, and logistics services. When we talk about the present situation, I don't like to say it, but it's like a perfect storm for the road transport industry. It's very challenging for road transport operators in developed countries, and it's quite dramatic for the transport operators in emerging economies. In the last 2 years, after the pandemic, road transport industry recorded losses of $1 trillion, which is quite a lot. And in this time, other problems were staying around the corner. They are not solved, like driver shortage. Today we have a driver shortage that is becoming kind of driver crisis, because according to our survey made for the last year, for 2021, 2.6 million truck driver jobs were not filled. So it's quite an impressive number. Also, in this period of time, we had kind of roller coaster in what concerns the role of professional drivers. At the beginning, there were some bottlenecks when the pandemic started. After that, the drivers were heroes, and we end up also having problem with the drivers not being able to cross the borders because of the vaccine certificate. So it was quite an interesting development. In the same period of time, we discussed a lot about the green deals, or a lot of pacts in order to reduce the CO2 emissions by 2050 in road transport industry, in global industry, or in regional. And it took a while that industry to understand and to accept, and to start in some areas, in some regions, to implement some measures. But this year started also with a new set of challenges. At the beginning of the year, we faced quite a significant disruption of supply chains, And this was not all. We could witness the war in Ukraine, started in the end of February. That will basically affect the perspective of the economy, of the global economy. And I know that the World Trade Organization economists, they reassessed their projections for world trade and downwards, of course, not upwards. And these estimates, of course, are also less than certain because we see that the situation in Ukraine is quite fluid and we don't know the outcome and the date. Also, from this perspective, we recorded a sharp increase in fuel price. In some areas, in some countries, in some regions, the fuel price almost doubled, which created quite a significant pressure from financial perspective for transport operators. Also, they had quite a very low margin to operate, 3 to 5% max, depends the region and the specialty. But with costs that increased like almost 20% only this year, from 10 to 20%, that's obvious that it's canceling the entire margin, existing margin. And if the companies, they capitalize themselves in the last years, this capital will be eroded in the few months only, without any intervention from the governments. And also this builds a lot of pressure for inflation. And you could see that the impact of energy prices, not only fuel, generated quite significant contribution to increase the inflation. I saw some numbers like contribution of 40% for Europe and contribution of like 32% of actual inflation in United States. So as a short conclusion is that the transport operators are no longer able to run mobility and logistics services in a clear and predictable operational environment. So they struggle with long-term contracts because sometimes it's difficult to negotiate them again, or the clients, they want to take advantage of the existing contracts. But this is valid in general for big companies because small and medium companies, some of them, they faced quite serious problems in terms of cash flow, and some of them, they started to stop servicing their clients. But in this time, of course, there are some requirements in some areas about going greener and greener, and all this only increase the pressure for road transport industry. But you say which are the challenges for us, but also which are the consequences, or which is the impact. And the consequences are already there because you can see that the shops are increasing the prices. Sometimes they increase more than actually road transport or transport in general is contributing because the share of transport in the structure of the price of a final product is quite limited. Depends very much about the product itself. It's a heavy and cheap product, the percentage will be higher, but in general for expensive and small products, the percentage of the cost with transport is not so big, but so the cost is increasing for the retailers or for the shops, but also in some situations they have some constraints on product availability due to the supply chain issues, and they are stemming basically from the road transport industry struggling to meet growing demand, but trying to stay alive. I mean, to stay solvent. Otherwise, we cannot go forward. So that's quite the picture we can see from our side at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All these challenges that you highlighted, I hope to tackle that as well with the rest of the panelists. Thank you very much. So let me come to you, Ms. Karadzic. In the shipping industry, do you see what are the challenges and opportunities that we are facing, particularly for the emerging economies, and why are they important in terms of the inclusive growth of the world economies?
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. I think that I would start first maybe by saying that my organization is representing 1,225 private port companies and seaport terminals. We are not by essence what we call we're not a mode of transport, but a rather node, which connects different modes of transport. And hence, we do have a quite clear idea on things that work, but also things that do not work. And at this moment, what we see is that, of course, we faced COVID. We had some disruptions like the blockade of the Suez Canal some months ago with the Ever Given. After that, we had now within ports, but also in the EU, we do have the sanctions against Russia, which are also delaying operations in ports because there are a lot of checks. So I would tend to say that the transport sector is, like Radu said, is under pressure everywhere. And of course, since shipping, if you were referring to shipping is a global industry, of course. You do have big ports, but you do have also small ports, and the ships call more or less all ports. So what we see is that we do have, for my industry, a lot of congestion at this moment. And this is not due essentially to the fact that ports are not working, because they are actually doing it 7 days a week, 24 hours. But it's because for us, this is clear that there are some inefficiencies in the maritime logistic chain, to refer to my industry. And these inefficiencies are probably due to the fact that we still do not have the connectivity we should have from ports into the hinterland. And to come back to the title of this session, I think that transport in general, and maritime transport in particular, are enablers of growth and inclusiveness. So whether for, I would say, the EU, which is my playground, or I would say for any kind of emerging economy, the strength of the transport network is actually giving an idea about how the country is doing. Because if you want to reach out to all the producers, the exporters, to be able to actually provide the supplies to the country, you need to have a strong and robust transport network with good infrastructure, with good connectivity, and therefore you cannot just rely on one mode of transport. So to come back to your question on shipping just reaches ports, but after that you need good transport that actually connects to the rest of the country. So I think that at this moment we see the limits of betting just on one mode of transport to actually provide all the supplies. And the lesson that we are learning actually at the EU level, in connection, for instance, to the Ukrainian crisis and tragedy, is that we see the limits of, for instance, the internal market network, that is railways, at this moment, on how we can to support Ukraine, for instance, to get the exports out of Ukraine. And we have a lot of efforts to make, and we are working, and this afternoon, by the way, I do have a meeting with the European Commission and all stakeholders to see how we are going to have these EU-Ukraine solidarity lanes in order to help and support Ukraine. So, as you see, transport is not only for peace times, it's also for crisis times, very important and crucial. And we, even if shipping is doing well, we still have, if ports are closed, we need to figure out how we can find solutions with other modes of transport. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for highlighting this port hinterland connectivity issues, and also, indeed, good infrastructure, good connectivity with other modes can really strengthen the resilience of the supply chain systems. So let me come to the railway sector, Mr. Vandenboss. So what role would the railway freight transport play in terms of regional freight transport connectivity, and the challenges that the rail sector is facing now? Could you elaborate a little bit on that, and see, do you agree with other sectors that we are facing as well?
Yes, thank you for giving me the floor indeed, and I can only confirm that Mrs. Kerdouche was just stating that the strength of a network is really important, and for, let's say, for two reasons. First, it is a source of mobility and also social mobility, and by that for growth of those regions. Secondly, it's always been proven, already been proven several times, that is also a necessary condition to attract investors. They will really look at how strong the network is, and that will attract them. And in that network, we of course are convinced that rail will play a very important role. A number of recent events have shown that what can be the consequences of the, let's say, the evolution that has been taking place the last 10, 20, 30 years of more and more unimodal supply chains, and what can be the consequence of that. The slightest disturbance in those supply chain create either stockpiling or out of stocks. The Ever Given was one of them, but also now we see with the Ukraine crisis, most of it was also being built on unimodal shipping. Now the ports are blocked, and we see immediately the consequence of that. So we really think that rail should be part of a network and can play an important role of developing regions. It is also needed because the predictions in the growth of the need for logistics and for transport are ranging from, depending on the source, 30%, 40%, 50% for the next decades. In that, it should be a multimodal solution. I think we cannot rely anymore on one mode to cover all that growth. It is neither, I think, possible and neither desirable, neither from an environmental point of view. So also there, it should be a multimodal solution that we need to find, in which, of course, rail should play most even a backbone role in that. This means that we are, but also knowing that, we are still facing quite some challenges, and one which remains very important is the level playing field. We can say whatever we want, we can say climate ambitions, but in the end, price remains a big determinant for companies or for deciding parties to choose a certain mode. And in that price, they tend to take only the, let's say, the private price between the contact parties into account in deciding which modes. And this is far from what the society is paying for its transport system. And so therefore, it is a strong plea for taking into account the societal impact and societal cost into contracting prices between different modes. Again, there needs to be much more alignment between different modes. We need really to outplay every mode on its strengths. If it's let's say very precious and very urgent, why not taking the airplane? If it's less urgent, why not the rail? If it's a big bulk, let's use shipping. And maybe a last thing, which is also necessary, and this relates to infrastructure, giving the horizon on which we are talking into rail. We're more talking into decades than into years. If you want to build that infrastructure, also stability is needed. It takes easily, let's say 10, 15, 20 years to develop a major line in rail. And of course, this will only happen, and this will only be attracting private investors or investors at large if it goes together with necessary stability.
Great, indeed. Thank you very much. I mean, it's really great to hear that all the three sectors are very much in line about the multimodal solutions. We cannot rely on unimodal supply chain systems, and the alignment of different modes, taking advantage of the sectoral strengths of different modes is really important. Thanks for highlighting that. So, Mr. Reja, let me come to you. The previous panelist mentioned about the supply chain. So from the global supply perspective, what are the disruptions that you are seeing now in the supply chain system, and what do they mean for particularly for the emerging and developing economies?
Okay, great, thank you. So I think in the supply chain disruption that we're seeing, obviously, first one is the COVID-related disruption. That really had created havoc for the shipping industry, for road transport, and some extent railways as well. Then the second one that we're seeing now is the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The war in Ukraine is also disrupting For example, grain exports. Ukraine is one of the biggest grain exporters in the world. 40% of Ukraine grains goes to Africa. So the fact that Ukraine is not able to get the grains out through the Black Sea ports means that this has a huge implication to the food security in the world. So what we see, this supply chain disruption is really showing us the world is very interconnected. People in Africa now can be impacted by the war in Ukraine. The supply chain crisis, the labor shortage we see in China when Shanghai closes down, for example, in the recent one, we saw that all the supply chain problems became acute. We also saw early in the COVID outbreak, it was an interesting situation between Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, where truckers were not allowed to go into Tajikistan, and that was having huge problems for the food aid distribution in Tajikistan. So really, supply chain is really becoming our lifeblood. It's like everything else. You notice its importance when you don't have it, so when it becomes acute. For developing countries, this is especially important because they don't have the resilience system to withstand this kind of shocks. Okay, some advanced countries have some system redundancy. They can get by while this crisis is going over. But in developing countries, they don't have that luxury. There is no redundancy. Secondly, they're very far from where the production centers are. So that means the crisis impact is magnified or accentuated because of the distance, because of the economic geography that they are in. So, and then within the region, the regional integration is not as developed as what we would like to see, trade within Central Asia, trade between Central Asia and Caucasus, for example, is not as much as we want to see. And most of the trading happens between Central Asia, let's say, and major trading partners like Europe or China. So regional integration then becomes crucial for the resiliency of the supply chain for developing countries, because that could be a way of getting the redundancy that these countries need in terms of getting an alternative supply chain system. So that's, I think, one. So if you want, it's just the economic geography of developing countries that makes the supply chain crisis much more acute. And then secondly, I think it was mentioned earlier, the price impact of this. When you see the increases in the price of commodities, consumption goods, that means developing countries, emerging economies would bear the brunt of this crisis, and that means they have to spend a bigger share on food, etc. We know that inflation hurts the poor significantly more than upper income countries. So again, the crisis would have a multiplier effect or a much more significant impact on developing countries.
Indeed, excellent points. Yes, intra-regional trade and regional integration is really important to improve the resilience, and also, of course, we need to also pay attention to the scale of the impacts that felt by different regions is really different, whether you are developing countries or developed countries. Excellent points. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Leder, let me come to you about specifically the region in Asia. So according, for example, to the latest ITF publication on Southeast Asia Transport Outlook, the total freight demand is projected to increase by nearly 80% between 2015 and 2030, and then even nearly quadruple the 2015 value by 2050 in the baseline scenario. So how do you see the growth of the freight demand in Asia? Do you see that as a challenge or opportunities or both?
Thank you very much. Let me try and respond to the questions, challenge, opportunities, or both, in terms of the connectivity and the inclusivity for the Asia-Pacific region, because clearly there is quite different ranges of countries, huge populations, 1 billion plus in both China and India, and you mentioned sort of those growth projections in freight demand or demand for travel. In addition to your Southeast Asia estimates, we're looking at a 5-fold increase in freight demand in India and a 3-fold freight demand increase in China. So those two very large countries are looking at significant increases in demand for travel. How is that catered for by different modes of travel? And rightly pointed out, different nodes or border crossing points or ports. So looking at the different road, rail, maritime, plus border crossing points, plus critical maritime ports or even inland port facilities. So that's the sort of connectivity and the inclusivity. The other dimension is that we have landlocked countries who have a particular issue. We have remote island states in the Pacific, also a particular issue that needs to look, if we're looking at inclusivity and ensuring that across that very large Asia-Pacific region, that each country has some way of connecting in to the regional freight transport corridors. And some of the countries, again, a very large population country, Indonesia, an archipelago, or the Philippines, 100 million plus population, another archipelago country. So there are a whole different range of geographical issues. Very densely populated countries, very largely populated countries, very remote countries, sparsely populated countries, and those have an impact on the different types of solutions. But I think zooming right in on your question, the key issue that we're facing in Asia and the Pacific compared to perhaps North America or Europe is that we are collectively perhaps in the very early stages of providing or developing or planning even the infrastructure, the multimodal infrastructure that's required to be able to carry current volumes, let alone the 4- or 5-fold increases in volumes. So that puts Asia region and some of the other regions that Ben and the World Bank represent in a very different position. We're not refining sort of established freight transport. We're more defining where they are, but more importantly, where they need to get to. So is it a challenge? Is it an opportunity? Clearly, it's a challenge in the short term, but it's also an opportunity in the longer term because we can set it on the right pathway, whatever pathway that is. Is it to carry the correct volumes, the most efficient ways to reduce any emissions from the sector as well? So in the short term, the sort of knee-jerk reaction, we need to get freight from point A to point B, from the production center to the major national port. The easiest solution, the quickest solution is probably road, but is that the best decision in the long term? So there is that policy and the consistency required within planning for a system that is going to grow by orders of magnitude over the next few decades, and making sure that that consistency of policy is realizing what the system might look like in 2050 or beyond, and ensuring that the starting point now is going in that same directory with the integration of multimodal transport and key nodes within those transport networks as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for highlighting all this intricacy and the complexity in this Asian context. So thanks all the panelists for giving us an overview on these challenges and the opportunities that also the emerging regions are particularly facing. Having acknowledged those, now let's have a discussion about what can we do actually to really enhance the connectivity. So Mr. Dinescu, let me start from you again. So what advices would you give to the government or the industry of the emerging economies on enhancing particularly the road freight sector?
Thank you very much. Indeed, I can say that road transport sector is one of the most flexible. Maybe it's not the fastest one, but as it was mentioned several times also here, it's quite a flexible one and very accessible. Of course, we believe very much in multimodality and to use each mode of transport for its best capacity and competence for the segment of transport of goods. And of course, it was mentioned here that it would be great to have a lot of alternatives and sometimes maybe some extra capacity. I don't think the customers are ready to pay for extra capacity, because if you had that in place today, we are much more in comfort than we are actually today. So if you look to the road transport, I can say it connects from the smallest village to the major global markets. So basically it's supply chain always is starting and ending with road transport. And I can say that the road transport is the vehicle for economic and social integration. And of course, when we discuss, it's about first in road, it is about the infrastructure, but it's not everything. A lot of governments, they are saying in order to have good transport, and I think it's valid also for other modes, but talking about road transport, they are focusing a lot how to build roads. But in the end, okay, we are saying we are glad to see every meter of highway or of the road, new road built everywhere in the world. But in the end, we made some surveys, and it was the result was that in a long distance road transport, 40% of the time was waiting time at the borders to cross the borders. So basically, only hard infrastructure is necessary, but it is not enough for sure. We need from the governments to put in place the soft infrastructure and to adapt to the necessary flows. If they are not streamlining all the processes and procedures in order to obtain the intended result, basically the investments made are not paying off, and they are not exactly in place. Also, when we discuss about this kind of facilitation, we are looking to digitalization, because in road transport, I think yesterday we had a round table with ministers, and it was mentioned that only in Lithuania, the papers at the border of vehicles, there are like 16 tons of paper only every month, per month. One country and an external border of EU. So imagine that's only one aspect, but the other aspect is about being compliant, monitoring the correctitude of data, sharing data, traceability, and of course reducing the fraud and reducing in the end the cost of trade and transport if you introduce this kind of digital tools that are related to the documents in road transport. The major document is electronic consignment note, ECMR, and we see a great potential as recently Germany joined the ECMR protocol. So CMR convention is a United Nations convention, and it's adopted by 58 countries in the world, and ECMR is adopted by 31 countries. Being adopted is one step is necessary, again, is not enough. You have to make it operational, to make it functional. But once Germany did this in Europe, I think there are great chances that a lot of other countries will make it happen in real life. And that will save a lot of time and will have a lot of predictability for the road transport industry. Not only because in my country, when I'm from Romania, when we discuss with the politicians, a lot of private users and private agents were very happy to hear that they will be able to use like electronic CMR. ECMR is one document, but we have other documents like TIR, electronic TIR, and the TIR is also a great United Nations convention that facilitates trade and transport crossing the borders between the countries, very safe, very fast. And this convention, since starting with May last year, had the possibility to be implemented from legal perspective in a digital format, which can contribute significantly to the reducing those waiting times I was talking about. So sometimes reducing these waiting times is extremely significant. We made some tests like from Pakistan to Azerbaijan, and using the TIR in this area instead of it compares, not instead with maritime transport, it's like 72% less time. But it's very important if the governments and countries are willing to adopt this kind of documents. And on top of that, we can discuss about e-visas, e-permits, everything digitalized will help a lot, again, in traceability, monitoring, being compliant, and basically helping road transport operators to be more efficient. We saw even in Europe some models of, okay, in Austria or in Germany, everywhere you can book your parking slots for trucks in electronic manner, but also we saw some systems where crossing outside of the EU, you have to book some time slots because there are limited numbers of trucks to be processed in one day, and I saw some examples in these areas. So from this perspective, I think we have a lot of opportunities that government can take and implement in their country. Sometimes they are a little bit reluctant. I don't know why. I don't think they see exactly the whole picture, that they will have a better control, traceability, and only pluses, I think, will be for everyone. So we see that there are a lot of things to be done. But again, every day, of course, you have to do something for short term, medium term, long term. So I don't say not to work for big infrastructure or for hard one. We have to do it, but it's not, again, the only thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, both hard and soft measures needs to go hand in hand. So of course it will be contributing to the different stages of the development, and digitalization indeed is also one of the important measures that needs to be adopted. Political willingness to adopt such kind of measures should also be strengthened. So, Ms. Karadzic, let me come to you in the shipping sector specifically. So, what do you think the emerging economy needs to focus on in order to improve their maritime connectivity? And are there some best practices that you can share with those countries?
Yeah. Thank you. Actually, I would like maybe to start with the comment in general. I think that the key success factors for any kind of, I would say, successful transport policy anywhere are actually valid everywhere on the globe. So for me, the tips that we use in the EU, for instance, are valid also for emerging economies and vice versa. I would tend to say that, for instance, my members, they are investors in ports. They have invested 56 billion euros in the less than past years, and they are willing to continue to do it under the condition that the rules are clear and stable. So first request, probably that is very important for my members, is that the rules needs to be predictable in the sense that there is a need to have a dialogue with the governments when it comes to how the private sector invests, for instance, in ports and in transport in general. The second comment I would like to make is that my members used to invest in ports principally, but today they are investing in intermodal solutions and logistics-related solutions, so which means that there is an expansion into the hinterland, and this is also of a nature to strengthen the connectivity of ports to the rest of the modes of transport. Now, maybe just a comment with respect to connectivity again. When we think connectivity, we think physical connectivity, but actually the digital one is absolutely crucial. Because if you don't know, and for instance, at this moment we are a bit worried in the EU about what is going on in Shanghai and the closure and the slow operations there, we are expecting a kind of tsunami within 8 to 12 weeks in the EU, in European ports, probably translating into a big congestion, because we will have all ships heading for European ports, probably even if it's not the 100 ships at a time, but still. And I think that the fact that we don't know and we don't have an exchange of information that is smooth and I would say real time is something that is just terrible, because if you don't know, you cannot prepare, you cannot anticipate. So for me, the connectivity has to be also digital, and we need to have this data sharing that actually works in the future between all regions, because I do not believe that after what we have been going through with COVID, that we will be back to normal again. I think we should forget about it. We will probably live in a world of uncertainty and disruption. And therefore, we need to become agile. And data is part of the toolkit that actually will help us to anticipate. So to come back to your question on what do we need and what does the maritime sector and the port sector in particular need from governments, I think that we need government to remove bottlenecks. And we mentioned it yesterday to the ministers that we met yesterday afternoon. We need these cross-border checks, for instance, to be the same, harmonized everywhere. Because if we still, even in the EU, do not have the same border checks between two EU countries, then it doesn't work. It simply doesn't work, because in the ports, then we will have problems of congestions. The second element is we need to ensure the level playing field between the different modes of transport when it comes to the regulatory framework, but also in terms of taxation rules, for instance. It needs to be equal in terms of incentives. Because if you do not have the same, then you cannot have this diversification of modes of transport, because the rules that will be applicable will not be the same. And maybe the third element, which is actually relevant for ITF, I think that we need to have a dialogue now. And a dialogue, because we will probably have in the future not only globalization, but also regionalization of flows. And hence the importance of keeping track of what is done in the different countries when it comes to policy and reforms. And sometimes we don't really know what is going on, and this is also, I think, an important element to attract investment and to continue to improve the networks everywhere. So I would tend to say that it would be important to have a good monitoring of the practices that are, I would say, adopted in the different countries. There are good pilots. Sometimes we see, when we read the ITF reports, we see that there are very good reforms in some countries. We need to disseminate them, and we need to discuss together how we are going to build a better world, where we need to have sustainability as an important target for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Indeed, thanks for highlighting this. So, bottlenecks needs to be removed, and harmonization of the regulations and rules between countries are really important. And I also hear, equal incentives across different regions. And then finally, dialogue is really important to disseminate the best practices, and also enabling the communication to reach standardized solutions. So thank you very much. Now, let me come to you, the railway sector, Mr. Vandenboss. So you already mentioned some specific challenges in the railway freight sector, but to tackle these challenges, what advices would you give to the government and also the industry of the railway sector, and to improve, the rail freight connectivity? And perhaps you could also share some best practices that you've observed with some of the countries that you have advised on.
It's maybe not surprising, but actually it's a plea by all modes and nodes for the same type of measures. And one which maybe we call it interoperability, which is very, very crucial. And it goes within the mode of rail, and also beyond the mode. Let's say maybe start within the mode. You can easily say the example. You can easily see the consequence of non-operability now in trying to let's say to evacuate the major grains from Ukraine. We are just having two different gauges between the Russian-oriented countries and then the European ones, which creates major issues. So interoperability is very important. And of course, also between modes. Again, we see a shift from the more northern corridors between Asia and Europe to, let's say, small tendencies to more southern and middle corridors. But they are by definition multimodal. They are rail, short sea, inland navigation, whatever. And it's creating issues. And even if already capacity is an issue, the transshipment itself and the interoperability between modes in the nodes is a major issue, and I would even say even more an issue than the capacity itself. So there are the links, and this is not, I would say, even in first instance, a matter of infrastructure, but indeed also on the non-physical things, the data. the lack of integration, the lack of visibility creates a lack of resilience, a lack of agility and flexibility. So if we would be able to come up with at least some similar standards between different modes, this would very much help. Then coming to policy, of course, infrastructure is important, but there again, looking again at the horizon that infrastructure takes, I think in the short run we can take a number of other initiatives which are less expensive, less costly, and probably which would bring us much more benefit in the short run. And I would say there again, as my colleagues are saying also, a level playing field. In the end, again, price is a very significant determinant for a choice between modes. And so if you want to have a balance, then there needs to be a level playing field. And if already policymakers could start, and this is in all regions, by not taking policy measures which goes against other modes, this would already help. We have seen recently a number of policy initiatives which, for example, redimension certain loading units, but which goes against the existing standards and which actually deteriorate intermodality. So already there, looking beyond the modes and looking more in a holistic way on the entire supply chain, that would help a lot already.
Thank you very much. So again, aligned solutions also for the advices for the governments in terms of solving the interoperability and multimodality, and collaboration between modes as well, and data sharing to improve the transparencies between these information flows, to improve the resilience, and also other policies as well. So very good points indeed. Let me come to you, Mr. Reja. So again, the supply chain issues. So you've got a lot of experiences working with developing the supply chain systems in Central Asia, China, Mongolia in your previous position. So could you perhaps share with us some of the key recommendations that you have provided to these countries, and that might also be applicable in other emerging economies as well?
Yeah, thank you. Well, that's actually quite a broad question, but well, I think first what the supply chain crisis has shown us is there are also quite a lot of opportunities for developing countries and emerging economies to take advantage of. So I was going to say that, this word crisis in the Chinese language, it's made up of two characters, right? It's danger and opportunity. So there's Wei Ji. Okay, we are in danger, but also within that, there are an opportunity to overcome on it. So what I think is going to happen with this crisis for developing countries in particular is many of the major economies are looking into what they're calling now multi-sourcing, meaning that they're not just going to rely on one producer, on one supplier, but look for different countries as well. I think this is a great opportunity for many developing countries, smaller countries. They may not meet the entire requirement of the demand, but at least they will have a niche market. So there's quite a lot of being discussed, for example, bringing some of the production closer to the US, let's say Mexico or Latin America, or other emerging economies like Vietnam are coming up also as an alternative. In Africa, Kenya, and several other places are emerging like this. And within Central Asia as well is an opportunity. Now, specifically on your question on Central Asia, the key there is there has been, now the Ukraine crisis has put this into a spanner, but the China railway corridor was merged to China-Europe railway corridor was emerging as a key transit corridor for trade between China and Europe. However, there are many countries in the middle. We have to see how these countries can actually then be integrated into the supply chain system, into the value chain system, so that they can take advantage of the corridor. Rather than being just a simple transit country where the railways are just passing through Kazakhstan and then on, what are the policy measures that these countries can take to actually take advantage of this trading pattern that's emerging, they actually become a trading countries in their own right. So there are a few things I think we have discussed in the past that could be done. One is to look at putting industrial centers, production centers along the corridor that could actually then, they use this spare capacity, especially when trains come back from Europe to China, and that they can use it to unload. Secondly, is to really look at the connectivity in a more economic geography way. So that way you look at where the production centers are, whether it's agriculture, industry, within the Central Asia, bigger Central Asia region, so that you can start thinking, bringing in most of these production centers into some logistics hub. So in other words, you will need cooperation within Central Asian countries as well to actually take advantage of this corridor. So it's not just only for Kazakhstan, but how can Kyrgyz Republic connect into the Kazakh railway system so that it can get its goods to do so. There is many layers of cooperation and collaboration that has to happen to actually make sure that these countries in the middle take advantage of it. Maybe lastly, this whole issue about first mile and last mile connectivity becomes crucial in terms of the whole supply chain system. And again, Europe and China are only concentrated on getting their goods from point A to point B. And this is what was our challenge. Okay, you guys can take care of yourselves, but how about the countries in the middle? How about Central Asia? How about Caucasus? How about the smaller European countries? How can they take advantage of it? So again, then it becomes, you have to have really a purposeful policy and well thought out connectivity strategy. It may not be the fastest route, because everybody, when I was working on that, they said, yeah, but the fastest is you just go through Russia and then get the Chinese goods to Europe. Well, now we know what that is doing to the trade. So, but, you know, the other countries have to come. So there may be an incremental cost, but then we have to weigh it against the benefits that this would give to the smaller countries. So when we look at connectivity, especially in this big multi-country, big economy connectivity, we should always see what's going to happen in the middle countries. Otherwise, what this will do is, if this connectivity is actually quite efficient, super efficient, for example, let's say between China and Europe, and then the middle countries actually will lose out because nobody will care to go and invest in these countries. So that's actually the downside of connectivity is it can exacerbate your geographic disadvantage because the poles are super connected now, and who cares now in the middle? And you basically, it empties out. I think this is what happens when you hyperconnect or when you have big centers, let's say in the middle, the rural areas empty out, the regions empty out. So it's important to really look at the downside of connectivity as well.
Excellent point, really. So yes, while we are improving the regional international corridors, do not forget the local connectivity, taking advantage of the advent of the good connectivity internationally to boost the local economies as well. Do not forget that. So I think that's an excellent point here. Mr. Leder, let me come to you. In the Asian countries. So in your previous intervention, you mentioned about the geography diversities of the Asian continent, so like the remote island states, landlocked countries, etc. So what kind of solutions do you think we could put forward in order to ensure the inclusive development for such economies, given their specific challenges?
Okay, I'll try and be a little bit more focused on Southeast Asia this time, but I just wanted to mention the first round was very physical. It was talking, what do we need? And it's multimodal, it's nodal points, it's the physical infrastructure. The second round has been very much, I think everyone has suggested it's the hard and it's the soft and it's the digitalization. So I wanted to sort of give a couple of examples from Southeast Asia on that, which highlight the solution, but also add stakeholders, and I think that was being brought into the discussion as well. In the greater Mekong region, which is sort of a sub-region that doesn't have a political body over the top, it's southern parts, it's basically any country that connects to the Mekong River. So there is water transport involved as well. So it's the southern states in China, it's Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam. So we have been working with that group of countries, or part of southern China, and we started off with what we collectively termed regional connectivity, so it's very much on that physical point. We moved then to economic corridors, so it's picking up a little bit on what Ben said. How do those intermediate countries benefit? It's not just shift from southern Thailand to Bangkok or from Hanoi to Bangkok, it's what benefits would Cambodia and Laos receive in those other components as well. And two key things I wanted to mention. One was the nodes and those border crossing points and the need for digitalization. We were supporting a transport and trade facilitation agreement, so that's very much on the soft side. We were discussing earlier how respective timeframes for developing road corridors or rail corridors or integration. That transport and trade facilitation agreement took 15 years to get agreement. So we were saying rail probably takes longer than road, but I think the legal agreements might take longer than most, particularly where there isn't that sort of overarching ASEAN or EU component where those governments are used to talking to each other. So while we were working on that, we were looking at the border crossing points and very much on the digitalization, a one-stop shop. Not quite, because this is going back a few years now. It wasn't fully digitalized. You still had to come with a wad of paper, but at least it was just a wad of paper that you would hand over. But the stakeholder point I wanted to mention, and it was raised earlier, the border crossing points. So when that transport trade facilitation was agreed, it should have been relatively simple, because there was no rail connectivity in many of the points, to take your truck across. Simple. It had been agreed. But the local communities were losing their livelihoods. There was a lot of transshipment because they would take off the trolleys in Vietnam, off the trucks, put it on little trolleys, hand carts, pull it across, put it on a truck in Laos. The truck would cross Laos. The same thing would happen on the Laos-Thai border. The local communities then started saying, hang on a minute, our communities are dying. So it's similar to what Ben was talking, but at a much smaller scale, perhaps, than those intermediate countries. So then they started to bring in only a set number of vehicles were able to cross that point. So while it was legally allowed, then there was another voucher that was required, basically to stop stop the local communities dying because of those facilitation of trade agreements at a much higher level. So I think while we talked earlier about the hard, and then we were alluding to the soft side, those sort of higher level agreements, the other thing I would bring into the debate for successful or solutions is the broader stakeholders. And that local community retooling, reskilling, but perhaps a more important and a much broader one is the operators and the private sector. We've talked the physical infrastructure. In much of that region and the rest of Asia, there are a vast majority of freight is moved by single owner operators. So how do you look at impacting them or getting them to transform their operations, that they will utilize the road network and they'll come to the ports, but usually they arrive with a full load, but they more often than not will leave empty because there isn't yet that fully integrated supply chain logistics service. And that's hopefully the digitalization will lead a lot of answers to that in the future. But I hope that gave that example from the Mekong countries, Southeast Asia, gave a couple of examples on the need for broad stakeholder involvements, whether that's the local communities to make sure that they perceive benefits, but also how we look at the operators as well. Thank you.
Excuse me. Well, thank you very much for this excellent point, especially on this broader stakeholder community engagement. Indeed, I think to reach a broader agreement in terms of trade and freight facilitation, I think we need to bring all these different stakeholders on board and then have them on the same page. So now the last round of my questions would be centered on going a little bit beyond just the connectivity, because as countries are committed to climate goals and also recovering from the COVID-19 crisis, transport connectivity also needs to be digital, resilient, and also decarbonized. So now I'd like to get some of your views as well on these type of issues. So let me come to you first, Mr. Dinescu, again. So you already mentioned, digitalization, like e-tier systems, which, for example, entered into in practice, brought more than 70 countries on commitment to this e-tier systems. In your view, how can digital connectivities also support the sustainability goals in the emerging economies?
Thank you very much. I think if you're looking to the climate change goals, and the industry, all the industries are committing themselves to decarbonization as well as countries sooner or later. Of course, for short term, if you're looking, some EU saying 2050, maybe China 2060, India 2070, it looks like for a couple of years, some countries maybe will have a competitive advantage for production or whatever over the others. But long term, everyone will be in the same direction. And the good thing is that everyone is agreeing that this is the way forward. Actually, it is the way forward, because we do not have alternatives. Until some years ago, 20 years ago, every year we discuss about for how many years we still have available resources from oil or gas or coal or whatever. And now we realize that it will come to an end, and we estimate like it's 46 years maximum at the current level of consumption. But the level of consumption of energy is not staying still. In the last 25 years, increased by 76%. And that's obvious that the trend will follow, will continue. So basically, I think decarbonization is the only way to move forward. Of course, I think at current level, every authority in every country or region, they have to look at the tools they have available in their countries, in their regions, so they're available and suitable for them in order to implement and contribute. Because not necessarily the model from Europe or from United States can be replicated in Central Asia or South America. So there are quite different ways to start doing something for decarbonization in different regions in different ways. But everyone can contribute to that. That's for sure. And we have to start from now if you want to get to that point to obtain the intended results. When we talk about the road transport industry, you launched last year a Green Compact, and it's the way to achieve zero CO2 emission by 2050 by road transport industry. And I can tell you that it's quite a strong commitment from the road transport industry, because today they're operating something like 65 million vehicles, heavy-duty vehicles for transport of goods and passengers worldwide, and they represent 2.5% of CO2 emissions. And talking about this Green Compact, it's structured mainly on 5 pillars. First pillar, because we don't have a magic solution, one solution fits everything, and we do that, and that's it. And the 5 pillars are structured like that. First one is increased use of low or zero carbon fuels. And here we can discuss about the wide range. And some solutions like compressed natural gas or liquefied natural gas, biofuels, the technologies are already in place, and there are vehicles available, there are, networks to fill these vehicles. So they can be used quite successful for a period of time, and it will contribute substantially to this reduction CO2 emission. We estimate that this component can bring up to 40%, of course, reduction in CO2 emissions. Also, we're considering as a second pillar more efficient logistics with eco trucks or increased capacity vehicles. We can see these kind of vehicles in some Nordic countries in Europe, in tests in France, in Germany, and we can see them also in other countries like South Africa or Australia, where basically quite a standard truck, it's carrying 2 semi-trailers, at least in Europe is limited to that, but in other countries like Australia and South Africa, sometimes there are even more. Third pillar will be increased use of collective passenger transport with buses and coaches, and I think this it's quite a significant contributor, also with 20% equally with the use of eco trucks or high capacity vehicles. And I want to say that there are some surveys recently made saying that a private person owning a car is using that car only 5% of the time. So in 1 year, 5% of the time your private car is used. 5% is quite low. I mean, it doesn't matter if your car is electric in the end, because when it comes to subsidies and incentives from the government, you are spending so much to gain so little, while the commercial vehicles are used kind of like 65%. Sometimes they can go up to 85%. So it makes sense to promote or to invest where you are most effective, basically, to achieve your goals. The fourth pillar is more efficient and latest vehicle technologies, and here we can discuss about aerodynamics, like tires with low friction, low resistance, and so on, which can contribute also to a reduction in CO2 emissions at least by 10%. Last but not the least, the fifth pillar is improving driving behavior through training and education. And I can tell you that here also can bring a contribution of CO2 reduction up to 10%. And I tested in Romania with some projects, and 2 times for some years, and that was exactly the percentage you get as an average from the performance of the drivers after they were trained. Their performance improved 10%. Okay, we have some cases like 35%, but that was something wrong with them before. But I talk about the normal people, that they're saying we are professional, we are very good, and after the training, they realize that can perform better. So I think, again, it is something that everyone can do, something in terms of governments, countries, regions, and industry itself. Of course, the problems are very diverse from country to country. I mean, our colleagues in Pakistan were complaining about emissions in like motorcycles and small vehicles, that they make a lot of emissions. Our colleagues from Mexico, they are complaining about quality of diesel fuel, for example. So there are a lot of issues that they had to be tackled, and they can contribute in the end to emissions, to lower the emissions, and in the end to achieve these targets, which are quite ambitious for the moment. But if you don't start it today, again, we will not be able to reach those targets. And unfortunately, we are pressed by reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for highlighting these excellent 5 pillars actions. Indeed, hopefully countries will work together really towards the common goal of reducing the CO2 emissions. Of course, as you mentioned, like we are working together, but different regions will have to have some kind of tailored targets and solutions. Thank you for highlighting that. So let me come to the railway sector first. So the railway sector, Mr. Vandenboss, as a critical recovery sector post-COVID, so they will need advanced and unified technologies to better recover, right? So you mentioned a lot about also the digitalization in the sector. And do you see, like, you know, this new normal we are in now makes the railway sector sort of welcome the advancement of digital technologies more than before or not? And then how important is that using such type of digitalizations or other measures to reduce the CO2 emissions from the railway sector, although, you know, most of the parts are already electrified, but are there any additional?
I think that indeed the rail is being considered more and more as at least part of the solution of solving the decarbonization challenge before us. And indeed, of course, therefore, digitization will be one of the goals, of the needs, of the condition that needs to be met, and in the end, then indeed, rail will become the backbone. But the question of let's say environmental friendliness goes beyond the decarbonization. There are a lot of other externalities which might be even more important than decarbonization or CO2 emissions. It's things like land use, safety. They also count, and even there we see that rail is let's say one of the better modes that can be used. And the more that transport and logistics needs will grow all over the world, on itself, energy efficiency will become a big issue. So whatever fuel you use, it should be used efficiently. And even there we can say that whatever we do, and unless physics do not count anymore, rail is 6 times more energy efficient because it's steel on steel. So to transport 1 ton of goods is 6 times more energy efficient. So whatever it's being used, is it now the plain diesel or is it hydrogen or whatever, it is 6 times more energy efficient. So therefore, actually, whatever happens, rail will be part of the backbone.
Thank you very much indeed. And then also thanks for highlighting other aspects of related to sustainability, like the land use and safety issues, etc. Thank you very much. Let me come now to you, Ms. Kerduch. So, just to pick up on one of the comments that you had before about, the maritime has been very much affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and other trade tensions, and then this has provoked a debate on globalization versus regionalization. So I'd like to hear a bit more about your views on this and what could be the implications to the regional freight connectivity for the emerging economies.
Thank you. I think that we should have this discussion. I still miss it a bit because you have some people who have real nostalgia for the world as it was before. So I was hearing in a lot of forum and in a lot of discussions just after COVID, yeah, we will be back again and the new normal is a normal, etc. And I was like, my God, if we don't learn something out of this, then we are really bad human beings, huh? Because I think that the situation calls for awareness and more than awareness. I think that we cannot, like Mr. Morer yesterday from Shell was saying, we cannot be only users of dinosaurs' fuels anymore, for instance. So we have, and we are quite late, because today we have to deal with an emergency. It's not anymore we change whenever we want. And I think that if we do not decarbonize and if we do not speed up, we are heading for a catastrophe. So, and then sometimes my feeling is that we still have discussions as if the world was not going through an important crisis, and we are going through an important crisis. Transport is part of the solutions, of course, because of the carbon footprint, and we need to speed up. But to answer to your question, I think that all regions, all sectors should have hands on deck. Because, I mean, if we do not all make efforts to mitigate the impact of operations and of transport operations, for instance, we are going to, again, have big problems. And I think that if you see the heat wave that is hitting some countries at this moment, this is not a fantasy, yeah? It's real. And in ports, in particular, whether in the secondary ports or in hub ports, in regional or in continental ones, we see the effects of pollution, and we see the neighboring communities complaining more and more about big cruise ships emitting. We see also that some trucks are waiting because they don't have the information and therefore they are emitting. So to answer to your question on what is the potential or the discussion around globalization versus regionalization, for me it's not only about opportunities, and there are opportunities for sure. It's about how we are going together handle the emergency. So, and for me, if we are not capable of having this dialogue on how to spread the growth, because it has been only about growth has been only possible and therefore some regions, while some others were just looking and watching to the movie, I think that we need to be more inclusive. And we need to see how we can actually not leave the countries in the middle, as it was mentioned earlier. I think that we cannot just think about hubs. We need to have real hub and spoke, and we need to diversify the sourcing, and indeed we need to have this regionalization of flows. We cannot just continue to order things from the other side of the world. We probably need to be more reasonable also, and therefore I'm betting also on the consumer behavior that will probably change and will probably also impact transport in the coming years.
Thank you very much. So in the interest of time, to end the panel discussion, I'd like to also come to the World Bank and the ADB about the financing strategies and also the support that multilateral development banks that could provide. So perhaps starting from Mr. Reja, from the World Bank's perspective, what are the best ways to finance low-carbon regional freight services and which can simultaneously also help decarbonizing the sector?
Well, okay, so I'm going to be very quick because we have run out of time. But the only thing I want to say is when you talk about financing, it's a double entry. It's an equation. You have to look at where the revenues are coming from to support this and what is the structure of the financing. So the first order of things is you have to find a source of revenue that could be generated to support this investment. And then you can structure PPP, long-term loans, etc. On the other side. So I think the revenue could be extra charges on the highly polluting trucks, for example, from users, could be from taxes. But I think if we can link the type of pollution, the type of emission that the vehicles do, then that can be used or earmarked to support the decarbonizing financing strategy. Let me just stop it here.
Perfect, thanks. So source of revenues and also then structure the best financing models. Mr. Leather, let me come to you. So what kind of support could ADB be providing to ensure the inclusive growth across the regional and within the countries?
Okay. Again, very quickly, I wish we had unlimited financial resources, but clearly we don't, and our involvement is a drop in the ocean, really, maritime, compared to what the governments will put in, but perhaps much more importantly, what the private sectors will put in, both investment in physical infrastructure, but certainly on the operation side. So I think the best use of our limited financial resources is working with the governments to set the clear policy that will address both the connectivity issue, but ensure that it's doing so in a pathway to net zero transport systems. Each mode should play its role in terms of its ability to shift the greatest volumes, the right distances, and therefore emit less or emit zero into the future. So that's important. But we can really only leverage the kind of support we provide to make sure that we are looking at that fully integrated system of the hard and the soft components for multimodal transport. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Thank you. So I will leave the question from the audience directly after the session. You can interact with our excellent speakers directly. So thank you very much. Let's give our panel a very warm round of applause, please. Thank you very much. It was really an excellent panel. So lastly, I would like to thank all of our supporting staff, organizational staff, translations to facilitate this session. So without you, this wouldn't be as smooth as this. And then, of course, the ITF Secretariat for making this summit happening. And especially thank you who joined the audience today. Thank you very much to your contribution and attention to the discussion. I wish everybody a great day. Thank you for being with us. Thank you.